What about my love? Wasn't it enough? Just let me know.
It looks like to me that Georgia's been very, very shaky, and I think a lot of people would agree out there in the SEC East. As the SEC as a whole, we're going to get into more of this on Tuesday, I'm sure. We got two Florida guys that are on the show with me, and then I'm ACC because of Florida State, and Hayden is Big Ten with Wisconsin. But our fellow Florida Gators fans, they feel like they could come out and possibly win if some things go in their favor, but I don't think that's going to happen. But if we're looking at the Georgia Bulldogs and what they've done up to this point, going against UT Martin, having a slow start there, then Ball State, kind of the same thing. South Carolina, 24-14. You would expect Georgia to be getting over that 50-point differential mark every single week, and they just have not done it. Then they go against, UAB with Trenton Dilford trying to get those boys right, and it's 49-21. And then just this past weekend, if anybody's seen the game against Auburn, the Peyton Thorne, what was it, like a 60, 70-yard rush downfield, and I just knew that it was downhill from there. Carson Beck ended up throwing a pick in that game. Nobody knows who any of their running backs are. I mean, for God's sakes, they got a walk-on playing for them. They don't have that George Pickens type of, AJ Green type of wide receiver for their team, which is absolutely insane. Lat McConkey came back from battling a couple injuries and things like that. But, I mean, he, for the most part, he only had, a catch or two in the game as well. I can't remember what the stat line was for him, but in all accounts, a lot of people had them as the consensus number one team as far as getting into the college football playoff as well, to come out being the number one seed. And we're going to get into it. I mean, I definitely, as I try to pull up the graphic here, I definitely had them number one as well. I had my number two team being Oregon, which I still hoping on a hope and a prayer that will happen. I believe I had Alabama as my number 4 team, and I forget who my number 3 team was. It was probably Michigan or Ohio State or somebody. I had to go back and watch, but I do know that my number 1 team was Georgia, number 2 was Oregon, my number 4 team was Alabama. And by all accounts, if Alabama gets their stuff together with Jalen Milroe, I mean, that benching, on and off for 2 games, and the way that he's been playing, super athletic, and we've seen the plays that he's starting to make for Alabama as well. I mean, Nick Saban came out and said about, the difference between disciplining and I forget the other word that he used, but, he's like, or punishing and disciplining, right? And I believe that's what he was totally doing with Jalen Milroe, and hopefully he can get his life together. But Texas A&M with Max Johnson kind of looks like they might have something to say with Jimbo Fisher and the boys, right? So I don't know. I don't know if there's, Tennessee looked pretty good as well. I still feel bad about the injury that they suffered on the wide receiver core. Where's Squirrel White been for the last couple of weeks too? He was supposed to be the guy, but man, there's a lot of variables happening in the SEC right now. I mean, Ole Miss, the way that they looked against LSU is something very, very interesting as well. So, and Jackson Dart played a hell of a game for them. And then Florida just comes off a loss too. Vanderbilt's throwing their weight into the mix. Kentucky as well. They're undefeated. That's going to be an interesting game this weekend with Georgia to see how that's happening. But I think Devin Leary is one of those guys that we thought was totally going to look better than Will Levis. And on the other side of the coin, has just looked, pretty decent so far this year. So, and it's just so interesting to think about how this is. I mean, Devin Leary, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Carson Beck, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, they definitely, Kentucky definitely does have the better running back. 8 touchdowns, 94 yards. And then, they got Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is, if not the best player in the country, you got him tied up there with Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. I know a lot of people or consensus had Marvin Harrison Jr. as like the takeaway for college football, but the way that Brock Bowers has been playing and getting his quarterback out of trouble, it's something to behold. So kind of some stinkers this year though. Mississippi State is 0-3 in the conference. Arkansas 0-2. Auburn held their own. I mean, that 0-2 is going to have an asterisk next to it, but. And then Vanderbilt is trying to do their thing as well. We definitely thought South Carolina was going to have a better team by the way that they restructured their offense. What was it, the last 4 games of the season where, Spencer Rattler was going off? But South Carolina is not doing him any favors. I mean, Spencer Rattler has looked pretty good since the beginning of the season, and nobody really talks about that either. But there's a lot to actually like about college football this year because there's so many variables that are happening. I mean, we went into this season telling you guys about that the Pac-12 is going to probably be the best conference to watch because of the quarterbacks that are there. I mean, go down the list. You got Washington State, you got Cam Ward, Washington, Michael Penix Jr., Oregon, Bo Nix, Oregon State. DJ Uiagalelei, and then UCLA, Dante Moore's trying to get better every single week, and he's going to be a force to reckon with here in a couple years. USC, of course, Caleb Williams, then Colorado. Now you have Shedeur Sanders, and just the list keeps going on and on and on, man. Arizona, Jaden DeLora. There's a lot to like about college football this year. Just pick and choose what you want to see. And it's been hard for the predictions this year as well.